A dark and disturbing ending to what had promised to be the American dream fulfilled. Two national icons, symbols of hope and joy for millions, embroiled in an intrigue of deceit, revenge, and murder. How could such innocence be betrayed? Was it the evil seed of depravity that made them turn against their own destinies? Or was it society's unrealistic expectations for its own dreams and ambitions? The beginning was as light as the end was dark. They were the breath of spring. They were the expression of all our youthful exuberance, curiosity, and caring. They were Dick and Jane, and we had fun with them. They taught us to come. They taught us to come and see. They taught us to come and see Spot. And when we did come and see Spot, oh, look what surprises we had in store. In Dick and Jane we saw ourselves. They were our peers, and yet their purity and simple wisdom served as an example of what we could be, if only we truly learned to look and see. Jane, of course, is not her real name. The role of Jane was played by an aspiring young model, Rhonda Mosesman, chosen from thousands of applicants because of her bright, quick intelligence and innocent charm. The part fit Rhonda like a glove. She could run, she could jump, she could hop. And most important, the illustrators acclaimed there was no other applicant who could look and see quite like Rhonda. By a remarkable coincidence, Dick was actually named Dick, or more precisely, Richard Ivan Petrovich went by the professional name Little Dickie Peters. An industrious child, his 8 years as Dick were filled with long studio sessions, guest appearances, and celebrity endorsements. Unfortunately, his parents spent the entire fortune he had amassed with a lavish lifestyle and fly-by-night investments. Barely a year after his career as Dick, Little Dickie Peters was penniless. Spot, that lovable, all-too-curious cocker spaniel, was not all that he seemed. Cast as a 6-month-old puppy, real name Mr. Gibby, he was never properly house-trained. Not only did he leave copious piles of excrement on the set, which had to be continuously airbrushed out by the illustrators, he could be vicious with the children, cuddly one moment and snarling the next. The kids were traumatized each time he was brought into the studio. The day his contract with Dick and Jane Incorporated expired, his owners had him euthanized. The turmoil that Mr. Gibby brought to the sets was nothing compared to that of Jessica Stritch, who played Sally. Tantrums and tirades were daily occurrences. Her contract disputes put production on hold for weeks at a time. Not only did she demand equal pay with Rhonda and Little Dickie, she felt the book should be entitled Sally, Dick and Jane. Unable to recast such a familiar face, the staff planned to write out the character by having her hit by a school bus. Before deferring to the fear that millions of kids would be devastated by the event, a script had already been penned. Oh, look at Sally, look! See the blood run! Run, blood, run! For the next 10 years after production of Dick and Jane ended, Rhonda Mosesman and Little Dickie Peters found little work. They only saw each other during occasional celebrity appearances at Dick and Jane conventions, and when those dried up, they lost contact altogether. By a happy coincidence, some would say a tragic one, Rhonda and Dick, he had changed his professional name from Little Dickie the year before, broke back into the business together with an advertisement for Spam. 10 years after Dick and Jane, they were now man and woman. The attraction was instantaneous. Rhonda and Dick began a whirlwind romance, despite objections by friends and fans that their union seemed incestuous. Taking advantage of a mutual ad job for diamond rings, Dick asked Rhonda to be his wife. The prop ring was never returned to the advertisers. Rhonda Mosesman and Dick Peters were married amid a collection of 5-gallon wine glasses. Some speculate that Dick's alcoholism began on this evening. Their honeymoon was like a dream. The promise of a perfect life together was theirs. The first few years of their marriage, Mr. and Mrs. Peters were inseparable. They even took to wearing matching outfits. But clouds were beginning to cover their sun. The public was now disgusted at the marriage of their former idols who had once portrayed brother and sister. Prospects for work soon withered. Their bright and shiny road to success was becoming public transportation to despair. Worse still, Rhonda's dream of the ideal romance with her beloved Dick was being blown away by the winds of reality. Dick was becoming a cad. In an attempt to save her marriage, Rhonda submitted to participating in Dick's late-night acrobatic demands, but this only served to fuel his lascivious appetite. During a 20th year Dick and Jane reunion party hosted by their publisher, the couple was reunited with Jessica Stritch, who had portrayed their younger sister Sally. Dick and Jessica began a torrid affair. Rhonda soon learned of the affair, overhearing Dick's plans for an acrobatic session with Jessica. She was devastated. Ironically, hope for their troubled marriage came from a surprising source. Bert Blank, who had portrayed Dick and Jane's father, had long before become a hopeless alcoholic. His liver, heart, and esophagus ruined, he lay in delirious tremens for days in a Detroit hospital. Before his death, Bert was convinced in his delirium that he was the real father of Dick and Jane. He scratched out a will, leaving his small fortune to Dick and Jane, a.k.a. Rhonda and Dick Peters. Their marriage had a new lease on life, and they set out on a second honeymoon. But this new lease was short-lived. Still bitter about Dick's affair, Rhonda sought to revenge herself with a host of a dude ranch. Her own appetites now aroused, Rhonda set out to seduce every male within reach. At first, Dick was unaware of Rhonda's philandering, though vague doubts about her feelings for him began to emerge. Soon, however, from the packs of drooling men that followed Rhonda everywhere, Dick was convinced of her unfaithfulness. In anger, he tried to snap her neck, but only succeeded in spraining his wrist. Dick took to drinking heavily. He excused his behavior by claiming he was genetically disposed to alcoholism through his Dick and Jane father, Bert Blank. Thus began a slow descent into madness. Suspicion and long-simmering hatred were breeding sinister plans for revenge. Poisoning Dick was not an easy task, until Rhonda found a brand of cereal he couldn't resist. He even asked for seconds. After waiting what Rhonda felt to be a sufficient time for the poison to be fatal, she called the doctor. But Dick's constitution was much hardier than Rhonda had ever supposed. Once out of the hospital, Dick had poisoning plans of his own. Unfortunately for him, Rhonda was alerted by the smell of Vicks VapoRub in her coffee. The Peters household became a den of murderous intent. Daily attempts on each other's life became the norm. Rhonda cut the brake line to Dick's car, only to have him uninjured but the car totaled. In a desperate attempt to send Rhonda to Timbuktu, Dick carefully prepared a crate with cyanide, but Rhonda refused to get in the box. Dick bought a rifle. Practicing at a local gun club, he achieved the rank of expert marksman. For his efforts, Dick had hoped to gain a tombstone for Rhonda, but only received a shooting trophy. Dick was now certifiably insane. In his madness, he attempted to burn down the house with Rhonda inside. Instead, the entire neighborhood was laid waste, leaving their home the only one standing. It was at this point that Dick Peters vanished. Had he finally had enough and run away to make a new life for himself? Did he commit himself to an insane asylum? Who knows? He was never sighted again. The day after his disappearance, Rhonda was employed by one of her lovers who worked for General Electric Advertising. She seemed a new woman, carefree. She never questioned what became of her husband. Eventually, the Little Dickie Peters fan club paid to have a monument erected in his memory. Finally rejected by her former lovers who suspected her of murdering her husband, Rhonda Mosesman sold the house, and one dreary night slipped out of town, never to be heard from again. They will always be remembered as Dick and Jane, purity and good behavior personified. But Rhonda Mosesman and Little Dickie Peters leave another sinister legacy, that within the most innocent of us may lurk the seeds of evil and the promise of horror.